Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar around rent guarantee insurance. My name is Curran McKay. I'm the commercial lead at RentProfile, and I'm joined by Adam Weedon-Luck from what looks like his office in Norwich. I'm obviously working from home. Adam, nice to have you join us this morning. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Curran. As Curran said, I'm Adam Weedon-Luck. I work with Alan Boswell Insurance Brokers. I'm here in the office today. My role at Alan Boswell Group is to manage the day-to-day relationships with introducers, helping them promote landlords insurance and rent guarantee. This is really to help agents integrate those services into their customer journey, and it helps them to enhance their service packages and also to produce an additional income stream for their business as well.
Perfect. So this morning we're going to be talking about how rent guarantee, certainly over the last year, has moved from being a should have to a must have. So Adam, maybe you could start by giving us a little introduction or overview about what actually rent guarantee insurance is.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. So legal and rent guarantee cover, it's changed from being a nice to have policy to a more must to have policy. And it's really for agents and landlords to be able to protect themselves. The rent guarantee policy will provide letting agents and landlords that safety net should the prospect of the tenant default on their rental obligations. And it provides that financial security so that they're not left having to pay the mortgages without the income stream coming in. It does a little bit more than that as well. So a lot of people will just think it's just the rent guarantee and landlords. But it also covers health and safety prosecutions, property legal disputes, any repair and renovation disputes as well, and also a bit of tax protection on the landlords when they take it out themselves.
Terrific. Okay. So then moving on to the next slide, let's talk about the market, what's changed and what is changing as we go forward. So obviously things are a little bit in flux right now, and I can touch a little bit on it from the referencing side and what we're beginning to see in the market. But if you want to give a little overview from your side and what you've seen, Adam, first.
Yeah, as mentioned, the world's a lot different in the last 18 months, and this has really affected insurance in a big way. Rent guarantee went from a policy which not many landlords really wanted at the time to a cover which every single landlord was requesting from their agent or from their insurance broker. But with the changes in the world, so things like the government eviction ban, meaning that tenants couldn't be evicted for 6 months, furlough, lots of tenants then became at risk of not being able to pay their rent. And this meant an uplift in the claims reported and also the eviction timescale to get the tenants out, which meant every single claim was a bit more expensive than what it used to be. And as a result, insurers took stock, they pulled the cover, some insurers changed the cover they were giving, and unfortunately all the prices, they kind of rose as well. But we have spent the last 18 months trying to reevaluate the policy and bring a new policy out to the market so that the letting agents and landlords have access to the best policy possible. Things that have changed over the last 18 months, cover was restricted, like I said, down to 6 months in many cases. But under our new policy, which we've just released in August, we've increased that back up to 15 months worth of cover that you can get on a rent guarantee claim. We've introduced vacant possession back into the policy as well. Vacant possession is a cover where once the tenant's been evicted after a rent guarantee claim, we will continue to pay 3 months worth of rent at 75% of the rental amount while you're trying to get that property back inhabited again. There's no excesses on the policy. There used to be some minor excesses on some property legal disputes or on our legal expenses only policy if the tenant couldn't pass referencing, but there's no excesses whatsoever now. And the claims reporting period has been increased to up to 60 days so that we can accept more claims than we did before, because we don't want to be kicking the claims out. We want to give the landlords and letting agents as much possible chance to be able to make a claim as possible. But there's been a recent study, and there's about 400,000 renters in the UK are going to be in arrears this year. So it does really bring home to you just how liable everyone is and how it's going to happen to somebody that you know, that somebody's going to fall into arrears and it's going to affect somebody. So it's best to protect yourself.
Completely. I mean, we've seen the same over the last 18 months, possibly even longer, that things have been in a sort of artificial buoyance by the government. And you talked about the eviction ban. We've had to adapt our flows, things around whether someone's on furlough or the job support scheme. And obviously in 10 days time, the furlough scheme will end completely. And around 1 million people are still on furlough currently. And the real question mark that remains to be seen is whether or not those people are being artificially employed. Actually, will they have jobs to go back to after this period? What we've also seen through our platform is a rise in the number of fraudulent claims by tenants. Things like forging bank statements, which we don't accept, which other referencing companies do, and increasingly slipping through the net. Some of these aren't necessarily tenants being, what would you say, trying to defraud or a criminal activity, but there is a little bit of what you would call sort of lying about their applications or stating their jobs being more secure than they are. And we're finding those out as time goes on. I suppose that this kind of general summary from our point of view is that things are very uncertain at the moment, and that in terms of protecting your property, protecting your asset, there's never really been a better time to do it, or a more important time. So Adam, just going through those costs, and we spoke about this before, obviously the main focus for a landlord is around the rent, the loss of that rental income. That's the yielding part of the asset. But actually what people might not necessarily know is the other costs associated around evictions and so on. Could you touch a little bit on that?
That's right, yeah. So as you can see on the slide in front of you, it's not just the missed rent that you're going to be liable for should a tenant default on the rent. There's things like issuing a section notice, which will be £100, a possession order, which online is £883. You're then going to need a bailiff to enforce the possession order that you get from the court, which is another £350. So just as a minimum, you're looking at around £1,300 just in the legal work and the court costs for getting a tenant evicted. But then with the missed rent as well, it's about £1,000 is the average rent the month at the moment. So with 6 months worth of tenants not paying the rent, the legal costs associated with that, that's at least £7,500. But it can rise a lot more, especially in the London market and the high rents in London market. And it's also worth noting as well that if you do this yourself, issue the section notice or the courts and that actually if it doesn't go right, you might actually have to do it all over again. So you've issued your section notice and there was something wrong in the tenancy agreement or on the notice itself, the court will then tell you to go back, reissue it, and you'll have to then go through it all over again. So you'll be missing even more rent and then even more legal costs. So it's really important to get a solicitor involved, but that will come under the legal and rent guarantee policy. So for £195 against those tens of thousands, which you could lose out on, it's really is a no-brainer and you should be doing it. As I mentioned as well, it's important to get your documents in order and to make sure the section notices are issued correctly in your how to rent guide. RentProfile have a really good product on this where they've got a tenant onboarding system, and it's really useful because if you do their tenant onboarding, that will be able to then just come straight over to us on a claim. But Curran will be able to tell you a bit more about that tenant onboarding.
Of course. Thanks, Adam. And you're absolutely correct from both the insurance perspective, but also a legal perspective, having all of those documentation, those pieces of compliance. I believe that during COVID alone, there were 40 different new pieces of legislation that an agent or landlord needed to comply with. So actually keeping up with these things, as you mentioned, the How to Rent Guide, which the government seems to update at 4 p.m. on a Friday. Our onboarding system automates that compliance from start to finish. So right from the moment that we kind of onboard that renter, we issue the How to Rent Guide, they agree agency terms, they're presented with a fully compliant set of referencing criteria. And every part of this process, not even, for example, being able to progress to the signing of the agreement without that EPC in place, which we pull from the government's website if it's available for you. So it's all about reducing that burden of admin and compliance, but making sure that if and when a claim is needed to be made, that the documentation is all in place, all there and available. And that's what onboarding helps to do from start to finish of that process.
Yeah, because on our point of view as well, so we'll have agents or landlords that'll say that they issued the How to Rent Guide, they've then gone to renew the tenancy agreement and they haven't reissued the How to Rent Guide, and it catches so many people out. So yeah, this really is a really good tool.
Completely. So then looking at the purchasing criteria, so obviously we partner with Alan Boswell Group, and our tenant or guarantor referencing at low or medium low risk with these criteria are acceptable. But is there, if you want to talk around that a little bit, Adam, if there's anything you wanted to add as well?
Yes, so as Curran said, the rent profile reference will be acceptable then for you to be able to purchase the rent guarantee, provided it's on that low or medium low risk. But you may have tenants which are already in situ, and you wouldn't need to re-reference those tenants. You can say that they've paid the rent on time for the last 12 months. And when we say on time, that's within 31 days of the due date. That would then be deemed as your acceptable reference if you're looking just to transfer some cases over. But say the rent profile reference will make sure that the tenants have got no CCJs or bankruptcies in the last 3 years, and they need to be clear for 3 years as well. So if they've had one, say, 5 years ago, and they've only just settled it last week, it wouldn't be accepted. They need to be clear for 3 years. They need to have a identity check, so the rent profile can do that. Just proof of who they are, things like passports, driving licenses, utility bills can all be used, and that sort of stuff. And also just an employer's reference, just confirming that they're in employment, it's a permanent employment, and they're earning at least 2.5 times the rental amount. We can use self-employment for this. We can use pensions, and we can also use benefits as well towards the 2.5 times of making up their income. We don't accept student loans. That's one of the things we don't accept. But if the tenant can't pass the referencing, it's not the end of the world. You can always have a guarantor in place as well. And that guarantor would then just need to pass those checks, but they need to be earning 3 times the rental amount. When I speak about 2.5 times and 3 times, I know some agents will have it as 30 times and 36 times, but it's exactly the same thing.
Yep, agreed. And again, all of those points you mentioned, that's covered off within our referencing. So the advantage for agents and clients who need that peace of mind is that if you run a rent profile reference and that report comes back classed as low or medium low risk, then it's going to be eligible for the rent guarantee. So then in terms of talking about the actual policy itself, what's included and what isn't and how it's purchased, Adam, if you could touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I'm pleased to say that the price has come down from where we were in July. We're now down to £195, which includes the insurance premium tax. That's per property or per tenancy if it's on a HMO. The policy has been increased. Like I say, it used to be at 6 months worth of rental payments you'd receive, but you'll now receive 15 months worth of rental payments should a claim take that long. On top of the 15 months, you'll include that 3 months worth of vacant possession, which I touched on, which is the period outside once the tenant has been evicted from the property. So it can be up to 18 months worth of payments you're receiving. Say if it's a HMO, you need 1 per tenancy. If you've got a HMO though, where they're all on the same tenancy agreement, we usually advise against taking this cover and take illegal expenses only. This is just to do with the tenants needing to be 2 months in arrears on the policy for a claim to be valid. And 2 months is just 2 missed payments rather than 2 calendar months. So they missed the payment 1st of October, and then the claim is valid on the 1st of November. But there's no excess, so you're then paid back from that first missed payment.
Understood. Adam, we've had a question come in saying, can we set up cover mid-tenancy? I think you touched on this briefly, but it would be good to clarify again.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. So we can do cover mid-tenancy. If the tenant's been in there for the last 12 months, then you'll just need their rental statement to show they've paid on time for the last 12 months, and that would be deemed as an acceptable reference. If they've been in there less than 12 months, they would need to be re-referenced, though, just to confirm their affordability again. But on the mid-tenancy ones, if they haven't had cover elsewhere, there is a 60-day exclusion period where you wouldn't be able to make a claim. So any incident that happens in the first 60 days of this policy, none of that claim would be covered. The first incident would have to happen after day 61. This is really just to stop landlords being aware their tenant has lost a job, they've told them they're not going to pay the rent, and then quickly cover themselves for it.
Of course. But in terms of everything else, that's the policy remains the same?
Absolutely. Yeah, everything's the same.
Excellent. And yeah, it's great to see. I mean, one of the things that our clients were certainly grateful for over the turbulent last year and a half were that at no point did Alan Boswell Group pull the cover. And we had many clients working with us, and we're just keen to see, even at the higher price, to continue purchasing the insurance and seeing the price drop back. Whereas at the moment, everything with inflation seems to be going the other way, and the enhanced cover. I think it's refreshing to see.
Yeah, that's right. So
in terms of purchasing the rent guarantee insurance, Adam, how would that work?
Yeah, so to purchase the rent guarantee, you can access this via your RentProfile platform, but this will log you onto our agent platform ourselves. On your agent platform, you'll log in and you'll be able to look after your policies you've got there. You'll be able to renew policies, report claims, but you can also purchase your own policies. Purchasing a policy as an agent, you need to be managing the property, and this just needs to include the rent collection, which then gives you the insurable interest to be able to purchase cover. To purchase the policy, it's just a matter of entering the property address and the date you're looking the cover to start from, which is either usually going to be the tenancy start date or the date that your existing policy is falling due for renewal. It takes about 15 to 30 seconds to upload this information. We will then confirm cover to you via email. We'll also include a contract of guarantee document, and this is the document you can then pass on to your landlord as proof of the service that you've just purchased. With regards to payment, we then invoice on the 15th of the following month for any policies you've then purchased, and you can either pay this by backs or card, or we do have a direct debit facility as well, so you can spread the cost of the cover.
So really straightforward, and also quite good for cash flow as well in terms of invoicing.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, I think that sort of sums it up. Thanks for giving that overview, Adam. But if there are any questions from the group, we'll do our best to answer them. So I think we've had one come in there, which is, does the tenant need to be re-referenced at renewal? Good question.
So the tenant will only need to be re-referenced at renewal should they have missed any rental payments during that year. So that means that they were later than those 31 days for the before the payment was paid. They would then just need to be reconfirmed for the affordability, and they've got no CCJs or bankruptcies. If they can then pass that referencing, yep, they're absolutely fine to renew the policy. Just on the referencing as well. So, actually, it's come up as a question anyway. So, if you do have a claim, there's no need to renew the policy. So the question was, do I need to renew the policy if I have an ongoing claim? So no, you don't. You make a claim month 11, and actually that policy will then deal with the claim right through to eviction. And then it's only at that time that you'd need to renew a policy should the tenant be evicted and you get a new tenant into the property. So no, you don't need to renew it if you've got an ongoing claim.
We got another question in, Adam, so thank you. Does the policy cover for dilapidations?
Yes, so there's an element of cover for dilapidations on the policy, and this kind of ties in with doing an inventory check on your property. So you need to make sure you've done a check-in and a check-out at the property. So it's not a requirement on the policy that you can't have the policy if you don't do it. It just means you wouldn't be able to claim for the dilapidations, and it also means the last month's rent, which is due, will have to be paid by the deposit that you've taken on the policy. But providing you've done that check-in and check-out, there's going to be a cover for dilapidations. It needs to be a minimum of £1,000, and that can't be made up of more than 75% in fees. It needs to have £1,000, like I say, worth of dilapidations, and it also needs to be able to go to court, to be a 51% chance to go to court to see that we're going to be able to recover the costs for you as well.
Okay, that's clear. Let's see if there were any other questions just coming through.
If not, I've also had a point when I spoke about the deposit. The policy doesn't require you to take a deposit. So if you've got a insurance policy in lieu of a deposit, or if you haven't taken a deposit at all, that's absolutely fine. You can still take the policy. We just ask that if you have received a cash deposit or back something like that, that it is protected within accordance to the laws.
Of course, and again, within our system, within onboarding, we can auto-register the tenancy deposit, so that ensures compliance. But just to jump on that, Adam, would that mean that, for example, if someone used a deposit alternative scheme like zero deposit or flat fare, that they would still be eligible to take out the rent guarantee insurance?
Yes, they can. Yeah, that doesn't affect it, so that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, because it's a growing part of the market. A couple of questions from Janine. Hi, Janine. What do you consider as reducing chances of going to court? That's a good question. And can you not claim if dilapidations are less than £1,000?
Okay, yeah. So the dilapidations do need to be a minimum of £1,000, unfortunately. Things that will reduce the chances of it going to court, say if your tenant has left the country, for instance, or you've got no forwarding address for them to be able to chase them up. These are kind of things where we wouldn't be able to take them to court because we have no access to be able to serve the notice on, or serve on them. So they're things to bear in mind.
Okay, excellent. Let me just see if there's any final questions come through. No, doesn't look like it. Well, look, Adam, thank you very much for joining us on a Monday morning, and thank you to everyone who's attended the webinar as well. We are going to make the recording available, so if you haven't managed to scribble down all of the notes, at least you can refer back. So thank you very much. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. If you have any other questions as well, always feel free to message me, and I'm happy to come back on those.
Terrific.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Everyone. Bye.